This is Otogirisou for Super Famicom, created by Chun Soft and released on March 7th, 1992. It's a sound novel game. In this video I'm going to explain what that means, attempt to show its appeal, and tell you about the 7 others like it on Super Famicom, as well as some of how the genre evolved later on. But first, let's go back. The term adventure game is extremely broad, but for the purposes of this video, let's say that Colossal Cave Adventure was the first adventure game. Then Zork, then Wizard and the Princess, which added graphics. That style was the one Chun Soft used for Portopia Renzoku Satsujin Jiken, or the Portopia Serial Murder Case, released on Japanese home computer PC 6001 in 1983. Then, when that game was ported to the Famicom in 1985, Chun Soft created a new subgenre within adventure games. Or at least in Japan, because ICOM Simulation's Deja Vu, released in 1985 on Macintosh, is pretty similar in style. This style became all the rage in Japan, with all sorts of companies making all sorts of imitations, like among others Detective Jinguji Saburo, Blue Train Murders, Akira, Satsui no Kaiso, made by HAL, where the murders take place at a game company that's a very thinly veiled version of Nintendo, who by the way made their own attempts with Famicom Detective Club, Yu Yuki, and Onigashima. And even Princess Tomato in the Salad Kingdom would qualify as this kind of game. Interestingly, that would be the only one that came out in the West. Considering how big this subgenre seemed to be, I find it even more interesting how there are almost none of them on Super Famicom. Nintendo did make a new Shin Onigashima and a remake of Famicom Detective Club, but that was it as far as I know. Maybe it was because Chun Soft moved on. As I said, in 1992 they made Otogirisou. And from then the detective-style command-based adventure game was old news, baby. And now it was all about this sound novel. So, what is a sound novel? Well, basically it's an interactive book. Text roll on the screen, and every so often you get to make a choice on what to say or what to do. Sometimes the choices are illusory and don't matter at all. Like say you have 2 choices, run away or fight. If you pick fight, he fights. And if you pick run away, he says it's cowardly to run away and he fights. Other times the choices are important and cause the story to branch off a bit, or set things in motion that will pay off or come back to haunt you later on. So that's the novel part. But what about the sound? Well, according to the manual of Otogirisou, it just means that it's a novel with sound added. Stereo sound because Super Famicom. Which it uses along with the music to set the tone and draw you into the suspense or whatever else mood it needs to set. That's it really. Chun Soft did trademark that though, so the imitators had to tap dance around it with words like suspense game or multi-story adventure game, when they were just sound novels. Of course, a big drawback to all these games is that if you don't know Japanese, you really can't enjoy them. Sure, you could literally just press A a bunch of times and get to an ending. None of these games have any action parts at all, but it wouldn't be satisfying. So either you go learn Japanese and play them, or you let me tell you about them and a general summary of their stories. Here we go then, Otogirisou. This one is about 2 people, a guy, you can name him, and a girl, Nami. They are driving their car along a forested mountain road when they almost crash into an oncoming car. Then for some reason the brakes stop working and they don't crash. I don't know how that worked out, but it did. A bolt of lightning then hits a tree, and seeking shelter from a rainstorm they find this big old western style mansion in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by these yellow flowers. The flowers are central to Otogirisou, which is also the name of the flower, called St. John's Wort in English. Before the car crash, the guy tells the story about how the flower got its name. In the Japanese telling, it's about 2 brothers and how one of them beheads the other over a slight. The blood sprays on the flowers, and that's why they have those spots. In the non-Japanese telling it's similar, but it's John the Baptist, St. John, who was killed. Otogirisou uses a lot of suspense, creepy things happening and creepy sound effects like footsteps, creaking doors and the like, done very well with stereo sound. Being the first of its kind, Otogirisou has the least amount of endings and extras. It did start the concept of rewarding the player something new once they found all the endings, here signified by a pink bookmark in the file selection screen. Also, while all these games have save files, they also have autosaving as you play or read, so if you have to turn off the system in a hurry, don't worry about it. Otogirisou got a PlayStation remake in 1999 and a movie adaptation in 2001. I've made a video about that one before, link in the description. 2 years later, in 1994, Chun Soft would make the game that would become the most popular within the subgenre and actually spawned many sequels, Kamaitachi no Yoru. This one ditched the 16-bit pixel art of Otogirisou, for better or for worse, and replaced it with digitized photographs of a real location, with blue silhouettes of people placed on top of them. In Otogirisou you had to imagine a lot. With this they are able to show you a lot more. The story is about, again, a guy and a girl. He wants to be a couple, but she's undecided. They go to her uncle's ski lodge in the mountains for a little vacation. While there, they see a mysterious man in a trench coat, hat and sunglasses. And that night a note is found. Tonight at midnight, someone will die. After that, it's up to you and your sleuthing abilities to find the culprit before many people die. And they will die, because you have to fail a few times to be able to put it together. At least if you're stupid like me. Kamaitachi no Yoru is the harshest one of these probably, in terms of actually playing it. It's not just about enjoying the story here. Your life and other people's lives are on the line, and the stress of that is conveyed to the player effectively, I felt. The game has 12 different endings, and they do cover all the bases, from very happy to very dark and sad. After getting the pink bookmark, there are no less than 8 additional scenarios to enjoy, some of them being straight up comedic. Seems like the writers and creators had fun while making this game. Kamaitachi is a yokai from Japanese folklore that translates to sickle weasel. It's a creature that slashes you to death with blades, and it's been in more games than just this. There's an enemy in Ghosts and Goblins called this, and one of the playable characters in Natsume's Ninja Warriors is called Kamaitachi. Kamaitachi no Yoru, as I said, was very popular and had many ports and sequels, like 2 and 3 on PS2, a GBA port, a PlayStation remake, another sequel with Shin Kamaitachi no Yoru on PlayStation 3 and Vita, which also had a sort of spin-off that's a full-on visual novel, manga-style design and all. A mobile phone port, which actually got translated into English with the terrible title of Banshee's Last Cry. A TV movie was also made in 2002, starring Tatsuya Fujiwara, only 2 years after he was in Battle Royale. There was also a novel version, a regular novel, which I've read, and an audio drama on CD, which I've listened to. And they both have different killers, so as not to spoil the main game, which is very considerate of Chun Soft. The next sound novel game released was Yakko True by Athena. Similarly to Otogirisou, the title is a 3-kanji word of a thing that appears and plays a role in the game. In this case, Yakko True, or Noctiluca scintillans, not sure how to pronounce that, is a kind of amphibic life form that sparkles in the water. This game, released in the wake of Kamaitachi no Yoru, also uses digitized photographs. However, there are no silhouettes of people to be found here. It's also the first to display the text in the classic Japanese style, where you read it from top to bottom and right to left. It takes a while to get used to, and this way the kanji gets slightly squashed, so they are a little harder to make out. The story sees you, the player, the captain of a ship, going out on the Pacific Ocean on some kind of business. The ship runs into some bad weather, and people start dying. I don't remember exactly, but I really can't tell you anymore either, because although I've played it through to the credits, I only did it once. This game's way of doing things is that every time you replay it, more choices and bits of story is added. And to get the complete story, you need to spend about 10 hours, according to one source. That's a bit mad. Plus, while the story expanding as you replay it is nice, that still means that there's a lot of text which you just have to reread, which gets boring pretty fast. It did in Kamaitachi no Yoru too, where you had to restart from a chapter of your choice when you got a bad ending. Here you can only restart from an autosave point or from the start of the current loop. However, I do like the ship setting. Like the 2 games before this, you are isolated from the world around you and the feeling of helplessness enhances the mood. But because of the loop system, I think this is one of the weaker ones. There was a port made of this game for the Game Boy Color, imaginatively named Yakko True Gb. It's a straight port as far as I can tell, but I can't recommend reading that much on a Game Boy Color screen. There was also a sequel, Yakko True 2, made for the Nintendo 64, the only sound novel on that system. Interesting, as the vast majority of them ended up on the PlayStation. Next to be released was Gakko de Atta Kawaii Hanashi. Literally translated, it means scary stories that happened at school, or scary school stories for short, because alliterations are awesome. This game was the first of 2 sound novels made by Pandora Boxx for band Preston, and instead of having people in an isolated environment trying to survive, you're a high school student, with the name of your choice, of course, who've just joined the school newspaper club, and you listen to scary school stories told by the other members. This one takes it further by using digitized photos of locations as well as people. I'm pretty sure though that they're all employees of Pandora Boxx or band Presto. They don't really look like high school students. The game uses a similar system to Yakko True, where you have to listen to everyone's stories 7 times before you get to the finale. However, every time the stories are different, so that helps a lot. The stories are also pretty varied. There are stories of haunted mirrors that, if gazed into at a certain date and time, can give you the power of seeing when someone is going to die. A teacher on night patrol in the old school building driven to madness by something he saw there in the darkness. A girl who gets her relationship destroyed by a cursed payphone. And even really weird stuff, like a guy appearing out of a toilet and going into the mouth of one of the students. There is also an overarching plot hanging overhead. There are 6 students in the group besides you, and apparently there's supposed to be 7. You get number 7 to turn up by completing the 7 loops of stories, and I have to assume that number 7 stories will be the very scariest. I do like how varied this game is, and how there is no repeat reading you have to do. Including people was a pretty good idea, because then they can make them do unsettling faces and other things that are pretty spooky. In general, it's a quite creative game. An enhanced port was made for the PlayStation the next year called Gakko de Atta Kawaii Hanashi S. Next up is Akagawa Jiro Majotachi no Nemuri. Akagawa Jiro is a famous writer in Japan who seems to specialize in suspenseful tales of the occult. The story sees the predictably nameless protagonist working a late night in his office when he's called by an old friend who seems to be in dire straits. He neglects to heed her call of distress, however, and the next morning he reads of her death in the newspaper. Filled with guilt, he travels to the very small town where she worked to attend her funeral. But while dozing off on the road, he sees a vision of her and crashes his car. He's helped by a young woman, then prods the town people for information, and finds out that this is no ordinary town. It is in fact locked into a long and deadly battle with vampires. No, I don't know why the title of the game says witches when they are in fact vampires, but yeah. This game uses digitized photos, mostly, but without silhouettes. However, it's not as empty, so to speak, as Yakko True. Occasionally it does show people, and it has some striking scenes and effects that work really well on me. The story wavers back and forth though, from a somewhat grounded mystery to occult magic extravagances, sort of like David Cage's Fahrenheit did. But here I felt more prepared for it, and it didn't take me as much by surprise. I quite liked this one. It was based on 2 Akagawa books, Majotachi no Tasugare and Majotachi no Nagai Nemuri, both of which I kinda want to read now. Like most of the others, a remake was made for the PlayStation in 1999. Next, the 2 last sound novels, to be released in 1995, both by Imagineer and both released on the same day, Zakuro no Aji and Getsumen no Anubis. They were each developed by different teams though. Zakuro no Aji uses digitized photos and silhouettes just like Kamaitachi no Yoru, with one tweak. The color of the silhouettes change depending on the situation, which is nice. Getsumen no Anubis is the only other sound novel on Super Famicom next to Otogirisou to use regular graphics and silhouettes. Zakuro no Aji means the taste of pomegranate, for some reason. Takes place at the magazine office where you as the player are dropping off some of your sci-fi stories for the magazine to use when an earthquake strikes and the whole building falls deep enough into the ground that even the roof is covered by dirt. Everyone tries to find a way out and encounter zombies. In Getsumen no Anubis, you and your girlfriend, scientists, go to a moon base to work. After joining the others, a few people go out on the surface to investigate the strange reading, and as they come back, it turns out one of them is acting strange, infected with something. Something with tentacles. Both of these are a bit of a step back compared to Gakko de Atta Kawaii Hanashi and Majotachi no Nemuri. They're just not as interesting somehow. But on the other hand, they do tread a little more familiar ground with zombies in Zakuro no Aji and a story similar to Alien in Getsumen no Anubis. These 2 did not get any ports or remakes anywhere, to my knowledge. Now we enter 1996 with Kiko Mori by Pandora Boxx and by Preston. I don't know what Tsukikomori means, except for I looked up that kanji means the end of the month, but I have no idea what that relates to. It works the same way as Gakko de Atta Kawaii Hanashi, but instead of a school student, you're a member of a family, female for once, going to the anniversary meeting of your dead grandmother, and you sit down with the other relatives and tell scary stories. Not as good of a setup as the school one in my opinion, but the stories are still just as varied, and the digitized photos are still used to good effect. However, this family must be very dysfunctional, because some of them are a bit weird, and when I listened to one of their stories, she kept murdering me in the middle of it. I couldn't get out of it actually, despite restarting a bunch of times and picking every different choice that I could. Next time I will be sure to play it in a different order. Finally, there is sound novel Tsukuru by Ascii, which is actually an application where you can make your own sound novels. It comes in this big cartridge that looks like a Super Game Boy, however you can't put Game Boy cards in there. But you can put the memory pack that was made for the Satellaview, so you can take your story over to a friend's house, which I don't see the need for when you can just take the cartridge with you. You can also use it by making music in Ascii's other creator, Ongaku Tsukuru Kanaderu. Save it in the memory pack and import it into your sound novel. So that's something. I do intend to create my own sound novel one day, either in Japanese or even in English. There is, however, a sound novel pre-made and available to enjoy, written by Kenji Terada, scenario writer for Final Fantasy 1-3. For no particular reason it's split into the Zenpen and Kohen. Maybe it's because of the limitation in the creator, I don't know. But the story is about a young girl and a boy who meet at the boy's uncle's farm and sort of fall in love. But then the boy has to go back to Tokyo, and when he does come back in his college days, he's met by the girl all grown up, who wants him, badly. But all is not what it seems. The girl is in fact her sister, possessed. The original girl died in an accident shortly after you left. After this revelation and a pretty solid start, the story goes in different directions than you'd think, and it was pretty mediocre in the end. There was a sequel, sound novel Tsukuru 2, made for the Saturn and PlayStation. Now let's look at box arts for a moment. The worst of them are the two Imagineer games, with their design that doesn't inspire much reaction at all. Then actually Kamaitachi no Yoru, because it's just a title on a picture of a cabin in the snow. It's relevant, but it could have been a lot better. Then sound novel Tsukuru, which gets points for the shadow of the knife-wielding woman in the window, but loses points for the gnomes or fairies or whatever. Mori has a cool ominous moon and a glowing silhouette of a kid that I don't know who it is. I do like both Otogirisou and Yakko True just for being 3 kanji on a nice picture, a lonely boat at sea, and of course my personal favorite thing ever, a mansion. It does lose a point though because the front door looks kind of like a mouth, which makes the house look kind of like a face, which is smiling. Majotachi no Nemuri and Gakko de Atta Kawaii Hanashi are probably my favorites. Majotachi just because of the beautiful blue forest, and Gakko because of the black and white design with the kids' shadows. Something that actually becomes even better when you pop the game in and see the title screen. And listen to the title screen. I like that music, and music does play a pretty big part in these games. Besides the text, music is the other major tool to set the moods of the story, and all the games have their version of the calm song, the mysterious song, the oh no song, etc. Here are some examples. After the Super Famicom days, the sound novels kind of exploded in Japan. There are way too many for me to mention. Besides the remakes of the Super Famicom ones, which I honestly prefer the Super Famicom versions of, there are more with Akagawa Jiro's name, there are Haunted Trains, Haunted Photographs, there was one on Wonder Swan of all places, a Nobunaga sound novel, even fucking Gegege no Kitaru and Game Center Arashi got one. Some employees from Pandora Boxx left and made another one for Sony, released under the simple 1500 series with the creative title of The Sound Novel. Chun Soft made their return with Machi, first on the Saturn and then PlayStation. This they called the third evolution, and they changed things up by ditching silhouettes and going full live-action photographs. In 2002 they made Kamaitachi no Yoru 2, which doesn't have real people, but is back with silhouettes. However, they are more 3D-ish and move now. I haven't played the PlayStation 1 era sound novels, but I know they introduced the feature of ending lists and mapping the branching paths of your choice for ease of use. Something I did experience when trying out Kamaitachi no Yoru 2. An unexpected choice led to a comedic game over. And after it I could pick where in the story so far I would go back to, which was very helpful. In 2008 they did 2 games for the Wii, 428, which was in the style of Machi, and Imabiki So, which was more like Otogirisou in Kamaitachi no Yoru. They also made 2 games that weren't really sound novels, but actually did get popular in the West. 9 Hours, 9 People, 9 Doors, and Zero Escape, Virtue's Last Reward, which you might have heard of. As of now, the last sound novel they made was Shin Kamaitachi no Yoru for PlayStation 3 and Vita. So, this is the adventure subgenre of sound novels. If you happen to both like games and learning Japanese, I recommend these over RPGs for instance, because they have a lot of dialogue as well as descriptions of things. I played Otogirisou when I was still only at JLPT N4 level, sitting with my phone next to me and pulling up a dictionary every 10 seconds or so to look up kanji and words, and it was a good learning experience. Anyway, that's it. I wouldn't blame you if you think sound novels look boring. I mean, I don't like reading books either, but I find myself really digging these games. Maybe it's a combination of text with sound and some imagery that makes me like them, instead of just text. Hopefully you found this informative and got intrigued to maybe try one out. If you did, or if you've already played some of these, or just in general, please leave a comment. I can't be the only one who enjoys these games, can I?